unexpected death of George Floyd has indeed moved the whole world to unexpected places. However, it seems the momentum has somewhat stalled for Africans. Many of us are still asking ourselves, when is the aha moment going to arrive on the continent? What were the reactions in your country? I can only remember a statement, exemplary at that, from Nana Akufo-Addo, the president of Ghana, the only presently sitting African president to speak out against racial injustice and solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Before his government invites all African Americans to return to Ghana if America cannot treat them better. Is the silence of African heads an oversight? Do they know that during its summit in July 1964 in Cairo, the Organization of African Unity, the ancestor of African Union, adopted a resolution against racial discrimination, whether in South Africa, Rhodesia, or in the United States? A historic summit to which Malcolm X, the emblematic African American leader, was invited. Hello and welcome to a few select pieces of Malcolm X's transformative advocacy to serve and refresh the memories of our contemporary leaders in office and their political advisors.
African History Daily by my daddy.
Excellencies, the Organization of African American Unity sent me to attend this historic African Summit conference as an observer to represent the interest of the 22 million African Americans whose human rights are violated daily by the racism of the American imperialists. Because these 22 million African Americans now reside in America, not by choice, but only by a cruel accident of our history. We firmly believe that African problems are our problems, and that our problems are African problems. We also believe that as head of independent African state, you are the shepherd of all the African people around the world, whether they are still on motherland or whether they are dispersed overseas. Some African leaders at this conference have suggested that they have enough problem to be concerned about the African American issue. I must remind you all that a good shepherd will leave 99 sheep at home that are safe to go rescue the one who is lost and who has fallen into the clutches of the imperialist wolf. And if I'm here today, it's only to remind you that our problems are your problems. We have been forcibly removed and shackled from the mother continent, and America subjected us to the most inhuman forms of physical and psychological torture. Over the past decade, the world has seen our men, women, and children attacked and beaten by vicious police dogs, brutally beaten by police batons that ripped off our clothes and the flesh of our members, throwing us down the drain like garbage. All of these atrocities were inflicted on us by the US government authorities through its own police force for no other reason than to claim the recognition and respect accorded to other human beings living in America. We are helpless at the mercy of American racists who murder us at will for no other reason than the fact that we are black and of African descent. Last week, an unarmed African American educator was murdered in cold blood in Georgia. A few days earlier, 3 civil rights workers mysteriously disappeared, perhaps also murdered in Mississippi. Our problems are your problems. Recently, 3 Kenyan students mistaken for black Americans were brutally beaten by the New York police. Shortly afterwards, 2 Ugandan diplomats were also beaten by the same police who had mistaken them for African Americans. If Africans are treated like that when they are just visiting America, imagine the multiple suffering that your brothers and sisters who live in America endure. Our problem is your problem. No matter how much independence Africans gain on the mother continent, your problem will never be fully solved until ours are solved. You will never be fully respected until we too are respected. You will never be recognized as free human beings until we too are recognized and treated as free human beings. Our problem is your problem. It is never a black problem, nor a specifically American problem. It is a global problem, a problem that involves all of humanity. It is not a civil rights problem, but a human rights problem. America is worse than South Africa under apartheid because America preaches integration while practicing segregation. It preaches one thing while deceptively practicing the opposite. America is cunning like a fox, friendly and smiling on the surface, but even more vicious and deadly than the wolf. If South African racism is not a domestic issue, then American racism should not be a domestic issue either. Out of frustration and despair, our young people have reached the point of no return. In the interest of world peace and security, we therefore implore the leaders of African independent states to propose an immediate investigation into the situation of African Americans under the auspices of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. A final word, my beloved brothers and sisters. No one knows the master better than his servant. We have been servants in America for more than 300 years. We have a deep knowledge of this man who calls himself Uncle Sam. Therefore, you must hear our warning. Do not escape European colonialism, only to be defeated and dominated. Do not let racism be whitewashed by American dollarism. Do not become even more enslaved to a deceptive and friendly American dollar. My African cliché of the day after such a speech is simply a silence, a respectful silence. Malcolm X's words sound even better in 2020. Their problem is our problem. Ask Mrs. Kadiatou Diallo, the mother of a young Guinean Amadou Diallo, a 23-year-old boy who had just announced to his mother, who stayed in Guinea, that he had now worked enough to finally pay for his expensive university studies in America. Outside his home in the Bronx, unarmed, he was shot dead by New York police, riddled with 41 bullets.
41 shots.
His death provoked violent protests in the United States. A year later, the 4 police officers who allegedly took his wallet for a firearm were acquitted. 20 years later, here we go again. An unarmed man is killed by the police. Again, demonstration across the country. But the oppressors are united. They already paid to bail the murderers of George Floyd out. It's about time to ask ourselves when. When will the African states submit in absolute unity a special motion to the United Nations General Assembly against the police brutality inflicted on black people in the US? When will all of humanity rise to end the closed-door killings of black people in the US, in Brazil, in many Arab countries, in Africa itself? When? Not as long as the green US dollars can make our leaders red with pleasure. When? You tell me please, while I'm holding my breath until the next Sankofa body. Thank you.